So many people think that people in the trades are not smart.
Yeah.
So they had to get into this and work with their bodies instead of their mind. So is what it comes down to. And I've met so many people in this industry, so who are extremely smart. I mean, and I look at you and I to use as an example, but I mean, even my trades and things like that, they're actually very smart with what they do. They chose to be in this industry for a reason.
Hmm.
So, and it's because they know they can make a difference. They know they're really good at it. So in a lot of cases, and they want to go ahead and have that impact. So and be that person. A lot of them like being outside, like doing working with their hands. So, like doing this type of work. Well, and I think that's one of the big misconceptions that people have is that, it's all like for us down here, it's all a bunch of rednecks running around is all it is. So they're running around doing construction, people that don't have the skills. And I'm like, you don't realize. So some of the people that I actually work with, so graduated, in the top 10% of their class whenever they came out of high school. So,
Yeah.
and they know how to run a business. So there's no ifs,
Yeah.
ands, or buts about it. Welcome to the Builder Hacks Podcast, your go-to destination for cutting-edge strategies, time-tested systems, and invaluable insights to revolutionize your construction business and elevate your life. Join your hosts, Nate Piper and Keith Meals, seasoned contractors who are not just in the trenches, but are also pioneering the future of the industry through Concord University. In each episode, we dive deep into the minds of the industry's most accomplished building professionals, uncovering their secrets to success and sharing actionable tips to help you thrive. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, our goal is to empower you to build a brighter future for yourself and for America. Tune in, level up, and let's build a better tomorrow together. This is the Builder Hacks Podcast. Build your future, building America. All right, we wanted to do something a little bit different this week. So, and it's one of those pieces where we got into a lot of things with a lot of the first, 20 or so episodes that we've done, and we really didn't dive deep. And it's one of those pieces that we're always talking about. Let's go ahead and interview successful business owners, and we haven't interviewed Nate. So, and Nate is one of those successful business owners. And same thing, we haven't interviewed me. So this week we're going to go ahead and Nate's going to fire up some questions to me. So to find out what I've done, so in my life to grow my business, how I got where I'm at right now. So it'll kind of provide a little inside peek. So we're just going to go ahead and kick off. Nate is on the clock asking the questions, and I'm in the hot
Beep,
seat
beep,
with the light in my face.
beep. Well, good morning to you. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to do any hard rapid fire questions. But we are just going to dive in and ask some good ones. And I think my first question is going to be what can you share about the turning point in your career that changed everything? Like, what is that one moment um, or scenario that happened that came in and then it just everything you're going in one direction and it just turned for you and you figured out, oh, I really need to be going in that direction.
It was funny because whenever I got started with this, the way I got into construction itself was I ended up getting laid off from the job I was working at. And for the first few years, I was basically a one-man band. So I was doing a lot of the work myself, would bring in I'd bring in the plumber, or I'd bring in an electrician whenever that kind of work needed to be done. And the more and more I looked at it, I'm like, I need to go ahead and at that point, I'm kind of running it like it was a job, is what it came down to. It was a way to just bring quick money into the door. And I get it. A lot of people go ahead and start that way for sure. And I know for me, that was how it was. And then it's like the more I sat there and looked at it, I came to the same realization that I came to whenever I was 19, 20 years old and working in the summers and over breaks and things like that. Whenever I'd work in at that point, my girlfriend's brother-in-law's construction business. So I would work with them. And I looked at the guys that were in their late 40s, early 50s. So still out there doing the manual labor part of the job. And I respect everybody who does that. I'll tell you what, that is some of the hardest work that you do on construction or in construction. And at that time I looked at it, I'm like, I don't want to be that person. So who is having to be out there in the field. If it's my choice and I want to do that, awesome. So then do what you love. If that's what you want to do and you want to be the person in the field work and do that. And it brought me back to that point again. It's like, I could do this, but there's a limited life cycle to this for me. And that's the part that I hit. I'm like, all right, if I'm gonna do this, I mean, I came out of working for construction companies. It's like you've seen how the business model works. Now it's time to go ahead and create that. And that's where I started looking at, all right, how can I get into, for me, it was larger projects again, is what it came down to. So, because a lot of the things I were doing were, a bathroom remodel or something small, or even handyman honey-do lists and things along those lines, because that was the immediate income that I needed to have coming in whenever I first got this started. And whenever I looked at that, I'm like, all right, if you're gonna take this seriously, and you want to create something, you've got to sit down and map everything out. What does this look like? What goals do you have for this business? So what do you want it to be? So, and at the same time, who do you want to go ahead and serve? Because at that point, it was like whoever called is who I was taking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most businesses, again, at least the ones I'm aware of, start out taking everybody because right now it's just about getting income in the door. And it's whenever you get intentional and focused about who you want to serve, how you want to serve them most effectively, and start crafting the business around that and the messaging around that, is whenever for me the larger projects started coming in. And that I think has been one of the biggest turning points. And for me, is more exciting when I do a larger project, a longer term project, because we bring a lot more value whenever we're doing a large project because we're coordinating all the subcontractors, we're getting all the materials there, we're the one getting either the people with the vision or we're the one creating the vision for the homeowner either way, or bring the homeowner's vision to life on what they see it looking like, and just being that point person to make it all happen and get that result that they're looking for in their mind. That to me was probably one of the biggest turning points. And it's, I guess, probably the first time I actually looked at working on the business as opposed to just working in the business. And so many people say that, and it's like, ah, yeah, okay. It's true. So unfortunately, whenever you hear those things over and over and over again, there's a ton of truth to it. So pay attention. They're not just cliches. It's literally the roadmap. So to how to get there.
Yeah, I think every business kind of goes through that transformational piece.
Yeah.
It's like that. You got to make, it's kind of like launching it into orbit. You got to, do whatever you can to get whatever customer you can, and then you get to choose which customers that you like and which ones you don't, and then, kind of go from there. All right. So my follow-up question to that is then what is one mistake slash failure that turned out to be a blessing in disguise?
I'd say probably one of the biggest. And whenever I started in this industry, and I've always had that view whenever I look at things in an industry and I look at it from, in our case, the homeowner side of things. And it's always like, what are the biggest challenges that homeowners face with contractors? So I looked at, reverse engineer that piece and then solve whatever that challenge is. And one of the challenges that I used to repeatedly hear about whenever we were working, I was working for a production builder. So one of the things that you would hear about from people that they had remodeled before is, yeah, I gave this contractor a boatload of money in the beginning of the job and they never showed up, or they did just the bare minimum and they never got anything accomplished to the point where we were finished and they were way overpaid and they had to pay someone else to come in and do it. So my solution to that at the time was I will not take any deposits up front at all. So I won't worry about it. I'll go ahead and get the project started. We'll get to the point where there will be a first draw, and then I'll go ahead and take that first draw. Well, that worked for a bunch of the smaller jobs because it wasn't a big deal. You're not talking bigger money. One of the first jobs that I got that was going to be bigger money, I had a homeowner in one of the nicer areas, so of Orlando, and they wanted us to go ahead and put in a fence with stone columns. So they were going to be like 16 by 16 square stone columns, 8 foot tall, 6 foot iron fence in between them. So go ahead and put those in the ground along the whole front of their facade. Basically, it was fencing in the rest of the yard because they'd already done a fence around the sides and the rear. So with I think it was aluminum. So but they wanted the wrought iron look up front. So we were like, all right, perfectly good. So I went ahead, got the materials ordered for the fence. So I went ahead and brought out my concrete guys to go ahead and dig footers for the columns. So we dug the footers, steeled them out, called for inspection on it. So they came out and inspected it. So and we had passed and we were literally just getting ready to pour footers. Oh, and the challenge ended up, I happened to look up and I'm like, something's quite, doesn't seem quite right because we were matching where the two side fences came down to the front and just connecting them is what it was. I hadn't really paid attention until we were getting ready to pour the concrete and I looked up and I'm like, the far right column pad looks like it's over the property line because whenever you're in construction, typically utilities run close to where the property lines are. And I saw the utility boxes out there and I'm like, hmm. I'm like, this doesn't seem quite right. So I asked the homeowner, he's like, no, I had the fence. Whenever we did it, we surveyed it, went ahead and put everything out there. All the stakes were out there, and the fence guy ran right along where the stakes were. I'm like, I said, I'm still a little uncertain on how this looks right now. I said, I'm going to go ahead and call my survey guy out to go ahead and do the survey on it anyways. I said, I just need to be sure. He came out, he did the survey. Unfortunately, my gut was right. Oh,
Yeah.
and we were about 5 feet past the property line. I went and told the homeowner, and he's like, well, just go ahead and do it. Don't worry about it. I'm like, I'm unable to go ahead and build on someone else's property. That's obviously not allowed. They don't approve that. If I go ahead and put that in there, I'm liable to go ahead and fix whatever the challenge comes up later on. So I went ahead and told him that, and he's like, well, I am not going to go ahead and pay you to not do the fence as big as that is. He said, you can't stop on the proper where the actual property line is. He said, it's going to leave a gap in my fence. He's like, so just go ahead and take out the steel. I'm like, all right, so you don't want to do the project? And he's like, no. I'm like, all right. So I took the steel out, the rebar out that was in the footers. So we filled the dirt back in. So put the sod back on top because, well, thankfully it was only a few days. So the sod, that stuff
Yeah.
we took off reasonably good and we put that right back down. So I went to get a draw from him. So I'm like, all right, here's what it cost to do all the work that we did, including the fence panels that I had already pre-ordered, that I had to pay a deposit on to go ahead and get them
Yeah.
underway. Had ordered all that stuff, paid my concrete guys to dig footers, then fill footers back in, on that side of things. And then he said, you didn't do any work for me. He said, there's no result out there. He said, I'm not going to go ahead and pay you. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
He's like, that's just what he said. Do whatever you want. He said, if you want to, you can go ahead and, you could go ahead and fight it. You can go ahead and sue me for it. He said, I'm just going to tie you up in court. So that's what it comes down to. And for the amount of money now, at that time, the amount of money was probably like $5,700, somewhere between 5 and 6 grand is what it was. But at that time, 5 and 6 grand was a boatload of money for me because then, and this is the way you got to look at it. It's not just me selling another 5 or 6 grand job to pay for that. It's me selling, well, at that point, you're probably looking at 35, 40 grand worth of job to be able to recoup that cost just to get even.
Yeah.
So by the time you pull the profit out of it. And I'm like, I mean, it literally could have been a killer at that point. Thankfully, I was able to go ahead and add enough other things coming in that I was able to go ahead and weather that storm. So, but that point right there was where I made that decision that, you know what, certain problems, when you solve them, you've got to solve them in the customer's best interest and in your best interest. And in that case, from that point on, that's where I started taking deposits on everything. There's a deposit to start every job. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And actually, in the state of Florida, I don't know this is what everywhere, but in the state of Florida, you don't have a valid agreement unless something like kind has changed hands when you sign the agreement, which in this case, typically with contracts, is money. So for a
Yeah.
deposit. So truly, there's not an agreement until you have that given, anyways. So that's now I'm actually legal as far as the state of Florida looks at it, but it was a hard lesson to learn. And usually, those ones, at least the ones I've experienced, there's been multiple of those in different ways throughout the years, but the money lessons, a lot of times are some of the biggest ones so that you go ahead and learn where the mistakes cost you dearly.
Well, do you have any other money lessons that you learned along that pathway?
Change orders. So are one of
Yeah.
the biggest things. It happens all the time because, and this is the challenge was for me whenever I used to work for the builders that I used to work for, both the production and the custom builders that I worked for, they always took care of the change order. So I would just call into the office. Purchasing would go ahead and take care of writing the change order up and getting it signed. And I was always busting their chops to go ahead and get it done fast because I was the person in the field running the project. I'm like, don't slow down my momentum. So I want to keep everybody moving the way I possibly can. And whenever I started doing that in my business, the challenge was I was not the purchasing person. So I was slow. I was slow just like our purchasing people were. Imagine
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Getting
That's weird.
pricing on the people and getting it put back together and sent out for signature. And I went probably the biggest one that I had. So was they made a tile change. So, and I went ahead and actually bought the tile already. So brought it in. So it was there and they hadn't signed off on a change order. And the change that wasn't a big deal because we were putting tile in, but the big deal was they went from what was at that point a moderate tile. So as far as the level of tile, so to a very high end tile. And I brought that tile in and they're like, and I gave them the change order and the price. And they're like, oh no, we're not going to go ahead. We don't want to do that. Then we'll go ahead and choose something else.
Yeah.
And this stuff is sitting at the warehouse of my supplier ready to be delivered. And it was custom ordered in, which means that it could be returned, but there's a 25% restocking fee for that to go back.
Yeah.
It's actually funny because that tile is a tile that is literally in my home right now. So I'm like, screw it. I'm like, will you hold on to it? I was good friends with my tile supplier. I'm like,
Yeah.
can you go ahead and hold on to it for me? He's like, yeah, we'll hold it in the warehouse for you. So we
Yeah.
held it in the warehouse for years before I ever pulled it out of there and put it in my home. But that was one of those pieces that's where you
Yeah.
learn the lesson again. It's the paperwork's got to come no matter how much you want to move forward. So you've got to get the paperwork taken care of just because you never know when somebody's going to go ahead and object to something.
You
Even if
never
you
know.
give them that, this is a more expensive material that we're putting in here. Yes, but until they see a number and see what the difference is and then find it in their mind, judge whether it's worth it or not to
Mhm.
spend the extra money. It's the paperwork lessons are usually some of the big lessons in it.
Yeah, it seems like the paperwork lessons and the money lessons go hand in hand.
Yes.
And
Almost every time.
every time it's like you got to connect those two dots no matter what.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, so what do you think is the biggest misconception in this industry?
Are you talking from the homeowner side of things or from people working in the industry side of things?
Well, let's dive into both, but let's start off with the homeowner side.
The homeowner side of it, I think the biggest misconception is the pricing on everything. So they
Yeah.
think that we go ahead and mark things up so dramatically. So, and they don't realize that a lot of times it's not that much. And that's one of the reasons why I use the model that I use for my contracts. I use the cost plus contract. So it's very open. What that means for anyone who doesn't understand what cost plus is, my homeowners literally see what I pay my subcontractors and or my suppliers, whatever it's coming from. So they see that actual cost. And then we add two pieces on. One's a project management fee, so it gets on there, which typically doesn't change as far as that goes unless the project gets longer. So, and they
Mhm.
add things that are going to take longer on there, then there might be something in for that. And then we add a markup percentage for us. So, what is our basically takes care of some of our overhead pieces and our profit. And those are the pieces that I'm very upfront with that piece. It's spelled out in my contract whenever I send the contract over. It's spelled out in what we call addendums, so which are change orders whenever we send those over. So it's spelled out each of those pieces. So, and homeowners are always they're like, it really costs this much. So, and I'm like, this is where we're at in the market between materials, so between labor. So, and it's like my percentages are not huge.
Yeah.
That's I think that's the biggest misconception of I think that goes on both sides. So both the subcontractors and the homeowner side of things, they think the builders, so the GCs, are just raking it in hand over fist. And they don't realize that we operate on actually I probably operate on smaller margins than some of my subcontractors do as far as that part goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and that's I think that's a huge misconception. It's like we're not getting rich. And it's the joke that I always tell my subcontractors because we do job previews for mine because we do a lot of remodeling, which means they need to come out and see the project to know what we're going to be doing, how it's going to affect what's there, what they're going to need to do differently to make things work and everything. We go ahead and do those job previews, and it's like I have a painter. My painter's my best example of this. So he comes rolling up in a Cadillac Escalade. So with his wife to come out and do the job previews. And I'm like, he came rolling up in that the first time. So when we went outside afterwards, after the job preview was done, he happened to be the last person that was coming. I walked outside and I looked at him like, you realize what I think whenever you come rolling up in a Cadillac Escalade. I said, the first thing that pops off in my head is I'm paying you way too much money to paint my homes if you're able to roll up in a Cadillac Escalade. Now, it doesn't mean that he didn't have it financed to the hilt. Doesn't mean he didn't lease
Yeah.
the thing for all
Yeah.
I know. So, but it doesn't give that impression. The homeowner sees a painter rolling up in a Cadillac Escalade, like, what in the heck is going on here? And who the hell are
Yeah.
they using? And how much is that going to cost me? So
Yeah.
is what goes on. So it's about impressions, especially with homeowners. It's definitely about impressions and that type of thing. Hey, I got it. If you've got the big fancy vehicle, awesome. Do not drive it on the damn job site. So
That's
use
a
that on the weekends.
weekend vehicle.
Yes, exactly. Weekend only vehicle.
We've had that conversation a few times on Mark trades as well. It's like,
Uh-huh.
I'm glad that you're making money. I'm glad
Yep.
that that's how you want to spend your money. But
Right.
let's keep that the night and weekends when you're by yourself or with your family,
Yep.
And but because you're right, it is a big misconception,
Yep.
and it paints a different picture, especially for the homeowner, because
Yeah.
they're already like, well, this is what it cost, and then they see them roll it up in something,
Hmm.
better than what they have or equal to, and they're like, well, I don't get that,
Right.
So
That's when they start nickel and dime and everything that's coming through. So in question, you're looking
yeah,
for discounts and
yeah,
it's just not worth it is what it comes down to. It's easy enough, and most of the guys they have work trucks that usually aren't as
yeah,
decked out. I can't say that about everybody because some of them come
yeah,
rolling in with some very nice trucks lifted beyond all belief that that's their work truck. I'm like, that's to me that's
yeah.
crazy, but hey, everybody's got their own opinion on what they want to do with
Well,
their money and how they want to drive to the job site. I would not
that,
beat up a nice vehicle that way. So,
that's every young man's dream is to lift it,
yes, it
put
is.
some rims on it, put a speaker system in it, Be what did my daughter say the other day? That's glazing.
Yes, that literally is it. So, And I get it. I mean, a lot of them, especially whenever you go into business for yourself and you start making a little bit of money, it's like, oh, it's more money than you've ever had before.
Yeah.
The part that you never look at, and this is what I caution all of my subcontractors on whenever if somebody breaks away and goes and does their own thing, the first thing I caution them on is you need to make sure that you've got money put away.
Yeah.
So don't go just because you have what looks like a whole lot of money in your bank account right now, there's
Yeah.
going to come a dry spell. There's going to be things like taxes that have to get paid every year if you're not paying them quarterly. So as you're
Yeah.
going along, that you're going to
Yeah.
get hit on. So there's going to be unforeseen expenses that pop up that you're going to need to get taken care of. You've got insurance on the business. I mean, there's a whole lot of costs that you never had to bear previously that now you've got to take care of. And you know what? If you've got all of those things planned into your schedule or into your budget, and everything's set aside well enough, have at it. So enjoy your
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why you're working. But at the same time, don't do that. It's when 2008, 2009 came around, I don't know how many people I saw selling vehicles. So whenever that happened, because they had been, all through the early 2000s, people were living large in the construction industry. So they had
We're
tons of
all
money
living
rolling
good,
in the door. So and as soon as that dried up, they had a whole bunch of obligations that they were not able to meet.
which causes big discounts for everybody else.
Yes, it does. So it's what that actually that's the key for whenever you look at people who go ahead and have made a lot of wealth in their life. Typically, it's those downturns like that is where they make that. So because they're able to they know they hoarded cash or have availability to go ahead and touch credit that they can
Yep.
go ahead and then buy up all those assets on the cheap. So whether it's properties, whether it's vehicles, so whether it's equipment, whatever it may be, that's the time where you see people go ahead
That's
and make a
it.
fortune.
That's it. Well, so what do you think are the biggest misconceptions for the trades?
Well, I think that one of the biggest misconceptions as far as the trades go, and I'm looking at this from the outside looking in, I think so many people, and this is I think is one of the leads to one of the root challenges in the industry overall. So many people think that people in the trades are not smart.
Yeah.
So they had to get into this and work with their bodies instead of their mind. So is what it comes down to. And I've met so many people in this industry, so who are extremely smart. I mean, and I look at you and I to use as an example, but I mean, even my trades and things like that, they're actually very smart with what they do. They chose to be in this industry for a reason.
Hmm.
So, and it's because they know they can make a difference. They know they're really good at it. So in a lot of cases, and they want to go ahead and have that impact. So and be that person. A lot of them like being outside, like working with their hands. So, like doing this type of work. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions that people have is that, it's all like for us down here, it's all a bunch of rednecks running around is all it is. So they're running around doing construction, people that don't have the skills. And I'm like, you don't realize. So some of the people that I actually work with, so graduated, in the top 10% of their class whenever they came out of high school. So,
Yeah.
and they know how to run a business. So there's no
Yeah.
ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah. Now that you say that, I kind of think back, and there's been a lot of times where um, some of the trades they're so smart and they are so intelligent about what they're doing, and the people that are having the work done don't realize the capabilities that these people have, and I contribute it to the modesty of the tradesman who, when he develops that trade and he becomes that person, he says, this is what I do,
Right.
and he doesn't have to, you know, show his intelligence to everybody all the time, but and sometimes, I mean, they they do it in knucklehead ways. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those things, and but most of the guys that work for me or have worked for me, are extremely intelligent and organized to a point and get things done. They just need help in every aspect of life. But I think that's everybody.
And it is, and it's one of those pieces. There's definitely areas in construction, so for the trades and things like that, that a lot of them could do differently, which would be much more effective overall for them in their lives and in their
Mhm.
businesses. There's no question about that. One of the like whenever I look at that piece, one of the big things I look at, and like Nate and I are a little different as far as that model goes, because we go ahead and get additional trainings. We're involved in mastermind groups. So we go to other people's trainings where they teach you marketing, where they teach you business aspects, where they teach you other ways to go ahead and invest your money and things like that. So we're a little bit different as far as at least the majority of the tradespeople who I work with. And that's one of the things that people tend to short themselves on that. That growth doesn't stop. So whenever you leave high school, I tell my daughter that all the time. So because it was that you always had to study and you always had to read and all those things that a lot of people do or hate about high school, or college if they go to college. Whenever they get out, they're like, I'm never looking at another book. Well, you're going to be stuck with what you've learned to this point then, which is not a good thing for you. So at that young of an age to be stuck in a spot. And I think that's one of the big things that I see is a huge area for potential growth. So for the people in the industry. So is that ability to be able to look outside of that. The challenge also is though that we all of us in the industry think we're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. Even us, 5'6" people. So I think we're 10 foot tall and bulletproof, maybe even more so than some of the bigger people like Nate.
Oh no, I
And
think I'm
that's
bulletproof all the time.
yeah, oh, I'm sure you think you're bulletproof, but you don't have to worry about the size thing because we get the little man's thing and the hey, we're
Yeah.
bulletproof because we're in the industry type of thing. And I think that goes ahead and slows a lot of people down for what their potential could be on that side. And it's just that everybody takes a different path. Everybody takes the choices that they make. No right, no wrong. So it's whatever works for the person at the time.
So what do you think are the trends for the trades over the next 10 years in this industry?
You're gonna see a couple of things, I think. So one is we're gonna have a huge talent drain
Hmm.
because of the fact that you're getting more and more people that are retiring and getting out of the industry just because they're aging out. That is what
Yeah.
it comes down to. And unfortunately, when you lose the people that have been doing this for decades, you lose a tremendous amount of experience and tremendous amount of knowledge that right now there's not enough people to go ahead and teach that. And even when you get taught, it's just like anything else. You get taught a skill, it takes years to master the skill, even if you've been taught it, already.
Hmm.
And that's the piece that's going to end up lacking, which means, unfortunately for us, as far as an industry goes, the quality of work is going to get worse. I hate to say that, but that's what's going to end up happening. And lead times are going to get a lot longer because there's certain people like Nate and I are, and for what we do, we require the highest skilled people to work for us, which means that we're going to have less of those people to choose from, which means it's going to take longer to get things done because with fewer people, so they still can only work so fast means the projects are going to take longer to get to. So people are going to have to wait more to be able to get things taken care of in their homes. And it's just going to be the fact of life. Now, what that's going to go ahead and spawn at the same time, though, is two things. One, you're going to get more technology coming into the industry. They're
Hmm.
starting to see trickles of that now in certain areas, which you'll get more robotics and things along those lines, more AI as much as you can, but this is really one of the last industries that's going to be touched heavily by AI because it's such a labor intensive thing. So you'll see automation and robotics come in more heavily here than I think you will in a lot of other areas, and it's still going to take a while to get it in because there's still a long way for that automation to go to be effective, but it's going to be something that's going to grow. So no question about it here, and it's going to need to grow. That's the biggest thing, and that need will go ahead and push the advancing of that faster because there's no other option. And we're gonna see that it's gonna take a long time, and you're gonna see for people who are in the industry now and who are younger, oh, you're gonna see what's been classified as the new millionaire generation. So they're gonna come in, you come in and work in this industry and or own these businesses. There's a tremendous opportunity. And I think that's the exciting piece. So for anyone
Yeah.
who's coming in, that's what I encourage you if you're younger and you're willing to stick with it. So which there's multiple levels of when I say stick with it. But
Yep.
there's if you're willing to stick with it and learn it and get good at it, and love it, tremendously huge opportunity for you to create a life and a lifestyle that a lot of people who have worked in this industry for decades never get to see because the demand is going to go up and there's such a short supply of people who are qualified to be able to do it now. So this is the time. If you're looking to get into something where you want to be able to make a lot of money, for a while it was
Yeah.
all the knowledge-based industries and things like that is where you saw a lot of that growth. You're going to see a huge income explosion. So on the construction trade side, no question about it.
Well, so it opens up a different question, which
Mhm.
is investments, right? And what do you think people should be investing in? And what do you think is the highest return on some of these investments?
Whenever it comes to investments, if you're talking about people in the industry, if they're coming into the industry, the biggest investment you can make is yourself. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So the more you learn, so the better you get at what you do. So that's going to be something that gives you that infinite return. Because you're never really able to measure what that return looks like because of the fact that it just keeps compounding on top of itself. So whenever you go ahead and learn a skill, it's why we always say if you come in and do something, One of the big pieces that, like what Nate and I talk about whenever we're in the mastermind groups and we're in, is specialize in what you do. Get really good at that one piece. Because whenever you get really good at that one piece, you can build a very strong business around that area. So it could be something as, doing shelving. So you get
Yeah.
really good at doing shelving, get efficient with the system, so get the right people in. So that can be something that creates a ton of money for you. If you're doing drywall, get great at the drywall side of things. Bring other people and teach other people so how to go ahead and do that effectively. So to me, that's the biggest investment and the highest return you're ever going to get because no one can ever take that away. If you go ahead and invest in anything else, you invest in stocks, so you invest in Bitcoin. So even if you invest in real estate, all of those things can go down dramatically, if not the whole way down to zero, depending on what we're talking about. So anybody who I know Nate lives in Texas, anybody who's familiar with the whole Enron debacle, so of a few decades ago, literally went from multi-millions, if not billion-dollar valuation down to zero. And that's what happens with stocks. Those kind of all you need is one big,
Well,
super huge thing to happen.
part of
So
that one was had to do with all the thievery that
yeah.
the corporate execs were doing.
Right. And they
Put it
obviously
into
now
their
there's
own pocket.
regulation around that piece, but that doesn't mean that, hey,
Yeah.
every
But you
time they
take
put
risk.
regulation in, they'll find a different way to do it. So is what it comes down
I always find it interesting. A lot of people, they just don't want to pay for the investment, right?
to. Yeah.
And they get hung up on like, oh, well, that costs so much, or why should I do that? Um, it's kind of one of those weird pieces where I married my opposite. So these are
Yep.
conversations that we have inside our house, and it's like,
Right.
well, why should I pay for that for my company? They should be paying that for me. I'll just wait till they pay for it. And I'm like, it's $200 and you get the certification and you get the thing. And she's
Right.
like, I'm gonna wait for them to pay for it. And it's
Hmm.
funny to me how that mind frame works, right? Because in the trades, and I can't speak for every industry, but in the trades I know very well. And in doing that investment, they look at, okay, if I was to go and take this class, right? Let's say it's,
Hmm.
a water extraction, structural drying class. It costs about $400 and
Hmm.
you get certified in that. And you're now able to take that certification that you invested in yourself, you learned the knowledge, you put the effort in. Now
Hmm.
you take it and you go and you do the thing that you just got taught from.
Right.
And nine times out of 10, they're making $50,000, $60,000 a year in that first year. And it's like, okay, I invested $400 into
Right.
myself.
Right.
I now created $50,000 or $60,000 in revenue.
In
And it's
in
like,
year one.
in year one. And then guess what? Year two, it's
Right.
70,000. Year three, it's 75,000.
Hmm.
And it just starts, you start rolling that thing forward. And it's
Hmm.
so amazing to me that they won't spend the $400 to take the class.
Right.
And so, when you're talking about investing in yourself, I would say look at these places that have these courses and certificates and
Hmm.
certifications
For sure.
and get it done. I mean, welding is another great example where you can
Oh yeah,
go
for
and take
sure.
a class or something that's about
Hmm.
$1,500 and get certified in welding. And if you do underwater welding, you can go get a job making
Yeah.
$200,000 a year off of
Easy.
a
Yeah.
$1,500 course.
Hmm.
But they won't do it. They'll just tinker around, or
Right.
maybe they'll do welding in their backyard or at somebody's
Hmm.
house or go find a job somewhere, but they won't invest in getting the certification themselves or
And
knowing
it's,
the industry around it.
And I agree entirely with that piece. And it's no matter what level that's at. And it's one of the differences. Like whenever Nate's talking about that for the people who won't go ahead and spend the couple $100, I'll wait for the company to pay for me to go ahead and do that before I go ahead and do that type of thing. The challenge is that the company is whenever I think this is one of the biggest things you need to remember. So as yourself, you are your business. So whatever your name is, so Jim Brown Business, you are Jim Brown Incorporated is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
There's one person that'll take care of that business well, and that's Jim Brown. There's other people that may help, but Jim's always going to be interested in whatever's going on there. And when you look at it as a business, you providing more value, you getting more skills that you're then able to leverage into whether it's more income, a better position. So even a different business and an opportunity to get into business, all of those different pieces, they'll pay off at such a big rate for those who will look at it that way, who will grab onto that mindset side of it. That and this is where the difference comes in. It's long-term versus short-term thinking.
Mhm.
Short-term thinking is I don't want to be out the $200. So
Yeah.
long-term thinking is just what Nate explained. I go ahead and spend the 200 bucks, I make 50 grand this year, I make 75 the next year, I make 100 grand the next year. So because of what I spent the $200 on. And it's having the right vision. So the only time you should have short-term thinking is if you know you're getting towards the end of your life, you're getting towards a life transition, then it can be short-term for whatever you're thinking about at that. Other than that, it should always be long-term thinking for you. And it's one of the differences, big differences between the employee and the owner mindset. So the people who are owners
Yeah.
are typically looking at the long term. It's one of the reasons why they got into owning a business.
Yeah, and the investments are never short term. And I know
No,
that everybody talks about, cryptocurrency and things that are, oh, hit the wave of something that's hot
right.
today that's going to explode. Well, you'll be a millionaire overnight and all that. And it's one of those things.
It
It's
does
like
happen, but
it's rare, right?
right.
And it's like a million to one odds that you're going to hit that thing. But you know what the better odds are? One out of every three that put their head down and grind out become a millionaire over 10
Right.
years versus let me
Right.
spend 10 years just playing the lottery, you
Right.
know?
Yep.
Let me spend
And
10
it's
years investing in something that may happen out of every million,
hmm
or one out of every three. I just keep my head down and work toward.
it's when you look at that piece, it's the the piece with the lottery ticket are going after the thing that's, that hey, 1 in a million is gonna go ahead and hit. So
Yeah,
that's a wish. So
it
we
is a
don't build
wish.
we don't build lives off of wishes. So you build a life off of a plan and off of diligent, consistent, persistent, unending action, taking steps towards it no matter what happens. That's how you go ahead and build it. And it's not the fun thing. It's not
Yeah,
the exciting thing. And I think that's part of where the challenge comes in is that people want the piece that's like, oh yeah, this looks awesome. This looks great. This is so fun and exciting because you get to tell that great story. You know what? It's one of the biggest things that people look up and go, they're like, yeah, you hit this, like your business just blew up overnight. Yeah, it's taken me 15 years to blow up overnight is what it comes down to. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's the work that you put into it. And I think one of the biggest values that comes from that is if you took it all away, I can do this all again and in a lot
yeah,
shorter time now
yeah,
because I've got the knowledge and I know
yeah.
what levers to pull to make it happen faster. And that's the piece with the education that you get it. When you get the education and then actually put it into action, well, it's a piece that can never be taken away from you.
Yeah. You own it.
Right.
You posited that into yourself.
Yep.
It's one of those things I know for a fact that if something happened to me where I lost everything tomorrow, or
Hmm.
my wife likes to say, what if you get into a car wreck? What are we going to do?
Right.
Well, here's the thing. I can lose everything except for my mind. I can be,
Hmm. Yeah.
paraplegic in a bed
Hmm.
somewhere and can still make money running a business because I've done it and can redo it and can do it twice and everything else. I can go.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why I take risk at this point in time of my life is like I can take the risk because
Hmm.
I can rebuild everything
Right.
in a shorter amount of time than what it took me to build it in the first place. It's like I
Hmm.
saw that Grant Cardone, what was it, the billionaire or the undercover boss thing
Undercover
that he,
billionaire or whatever it was, or
whatever
undercover
it was
millionaire.
that he
Right.
did,
Hmm.
and he was able to, you know, disguise his identity, have a couple bucks in his pocket, no access to his friends, all the rest
But
of the
when they
stuff.
said a couple bucks, what was it, like $100, I think is how
Yeah, I
that
think it was
show.
like 100
Well, I mean, it was
bucks.
something ridiculously low. So,
Yeah, and he was able to be dropped off into a city, an unknown city where he didn't know anybody, didn't
yeah.
know, the landscape, anything, and turn around and make like 5 million bucks in, 60
Hmm.
days or something like that.
And the big thing about that for everybody is everybody thinks, oh yeah, Grant Cardone, it's all he can reach out to his contacts in the network. He wasn't allowed to touch his contacts or network. It
Didn't
was
have
he
his
had to go
phone.
ahead and create everything organically where he was at.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where he did it, and but it's because he already understood what he needed to do
Yep.
because he already gained the knowledge, he already paid for the courses, he already
Yep.
went through the scenarios to how to get it, and he understood what he had to say to the other people to get them to believe in him, to get them to that point. And so he was able to recreate a
Yep.
$5 million business in 60 days.
Hmm.
He'd already done it
Right.
because he took that investment and put him in himself. And so,
And whenever you look at it, here's one of the best things that like that's an extreme example because it's like that, hey, here's what happens, and you're not able to leverage anybody that you know, any of the resources you got, any of the contacts or the connections. The great thing about this is once you learn this, that restriction isn't on you.
Yeah.
Something may happen to your business, something may happen to you, but all of those people, all those connections, all of that is still available for you, which makes that even easier. Because if he could have done that, he'd have been able to turn that business, he'd been able to create that
2 days.
business. So yeah, exactly, within weeks maximum. So to
Yeah.
get it all up and running that way.
So, I highly encourage anybody to invest in themselves. I,
Yeah.
I think there's no better investment. I think there's a lot of different investments out there that have good return on money. And I think these different businesses and the trades have extremely uptick. And so, you know, I've thought about this quite a bit. If I was to start all over and put my money, now that I've invested myself and now I've got capital to expand, where would I put my money into
Mhm.
these different trades? Have you ever thought about that?
As far as those pieces go, yes, I have. And one of the big things that I'm looking at right now, though, is because I've got two next steps. One's going ahead and creating a whole nother business. So as
Yeah.
far as that goes, that's the big lift again. And it's one of the things that whenever you talk to entrepreneurs, it's a bigger lift to create something brand new than it is to go ahead and buy something existing. And that's the other part that I'm looking at is buying something existing. Now, whenever I say that, I look at the trades that we've got in the industry that are indispensable. So the ones that no matter whether the economy's good or the economy's bad, if something happens, if your HVAC breaks down in your house, you're calling an HVAC company, you'll find the money, you'll get the financing, you'll do whatever it takes to go ahead and get that right in your home. Same
Yeah.
thing with the plumber. The water heater goes out, so there's a leak in the house. So you're going to go ahead and get those things taken care of. There's not an if, an and, or a but about it. So it's like I look at those industries like that as that's the next one of the next steps for us. So is to go ahead and start buying those types of businesses because then what we do with remodeling, we do it at a high level. And because of the fact that I work with the clientele that I work with, whether the economy's up or down, the majority of them are still going to live their lives and do their thing. There's no question about it. But it does go ahead and affect some of the additional that comes in because there's a certain amount that'll move at that level, and that amount is relatively stable with the business. The ups and down part basically are based off of what's going on in the economy, whether people feel like they've got more money, whether they want to put it in their home. So, and that's where the bumps and surges come on our business side right now. And that's the
Yeah.
part that goes up and down. And I don't want to see that go up and down is what it comes down to. So I only like one direction. And so with that direction going ahead and getting those types of businesses in, I look at it also, there's so much that those businesses for the majority of the people, you have some really big companies out there, and a lot of times they're either national companies or companies that are owned by investment firms.
Oh yeah.
And they do a lot of the things that Nate and I know, so that actually work for the businesses that we have. And it's like I would love to go ahead and that's what we're looking for next is to go ahead and buy a plumbing company, go ahead and buy an HVAC company. So go ahead and buy an electrician. So and bring those companies in-house. It helps us because it's some of our biggest expenses as far as the remodeling side goes, anyways, on the construction side. So and B, we look at it as hey, that's another additional income source for us, additional leads. That's what it comes into. There's so many different levels of that. And I think that's one of the things that as you level up, as you learn more, part that Nate was talking about already. So as you're around more people who do this and grow their lives, you start to look at it whenever they make acquisitions. So it's typically already aligned with whatever vision they have in their life. So like all the things that I'm thinking about and doing, so are all construction related, which makes sense. That's what I know. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, and then B, there are so many different ways. I mean, that you buy a plumber, the plumber that I buy, that's the business that I buy, and obviously the plumbing business is one stream of income. So I can go ahead and use those leads. So on the remodeling side, because of course I'm going to market remodeling services to them outside of just the plumbing things that they go ahead and take care of. So I'm also going to go ahead and market a home maintenance business to them. So to be
Yeah.
able to go ahead and take it. So it's like all of those pieces weave together so, and then build all of the businesses at the same time. It's not just buying a plumbing business that the plumbing business may grow on its own. It's how do I make all of the other ones grow at the same time? And that's leverage is what it comes down to.
Yeah, all of the necessity businesses and trades are on the verge of being gobbled up. They're still in their first evolution with these hedge funds of being able to uh, buy them and control them and kind of create them. I think we've got probably two more rounds of this over the next 15 years
Hmm.
until they're big monopolies like all the insurance companies are today. But um, I think buying it now, buying it early is probably a great idea.
And at the same time, and I want people who are getting into the industry or maybe young in the industry already to realize too, and because that happens, and it's one of the pieces that I have so many homeowners down here who will call me and I get called in to do a bigger remodel job. And they're like, I reached out to one of the like the big electrician in the area,
Yeah.
and they came out and gave me a price for doing a lot of stuff at the house. And I'm like, they gave me the price for that. I'm like, um, as long as you're okay with us going ahead and doing that and adding that to the scope of the work, I can go ahead and save you money on that side. That then you can go ahead and do some of the other things in your home that you want to do. So if you're younger in the industry, realize this: those large companies come in, which is great because they've got a lot of money to put behind themselves for marketing. Yeah, you've got a huge opportunity. A, you're not the large company. A lot of people like to support local companies, smaller companies, because they love that because they know if you've got the smaller companies there, you create more competition in your market and you've got more people in the industry, which is a good thing in both ways. So, and then the other thing, whenever it comes down to that, so is there'll be certain people that won't do business with those big companies at all.
Yeah. I won't.
So they want the smaller company. They want that family run person. They want to know the person that comes in the door. So whenever that happens, so that presents you throw rocks at the big companies. So that's what I do all the time. And I literally run through their business model because the amount of money they have to spend in marketing to go ahead and get market share. So the amount of trucks that they put on the road so that they can go ahead and do the responding as quickly as they do and things like that. Those work for them on their marketing side of things. But I throw that back at them and I'm like, I tell the homeowner, this is what you're paying for. You're paying for all of their marketing. You're paying for their multiple levels of management. You're paying for investors who need to make money off of this because they're all beholden to those investment companies. So you're literally putting money in somebody else's pocket just to go ahead and do that outside of the business owner, outside of the plumber, outside of these few people that are working there. So you always look for the leverage points is what you look for, and it's how you're different than the other people. And that's the piece that we'll get into whenever they start asking questions. That's the question. Like, why are they so much more? And it's like, boom, I can tell you why they're more. I understand the business
Yeah.
model. And I get it. If I'm them, I'm still doing that same thing. And at the same thing, their
It
leverage points are
works.
they can get there quickly. So
Yeah.
because they've got a huge fleet. So they've got lots of materials they can bring out because they usually have a warehouse full of stuff. They don't have to wait to order anything in.
Yeah.
So they've got advantages too.
Well, their advantages are wasteful, right?
Yes.
And so
Literally.
they're not efficient in any way, shape, fashion, or form. But they are effective because they have speed at which they can move that makes it um,
Makes it appear more effective.
yeah. And so but you look at it, if you were doing an analysis of their business model, you would see that the waste that they have in time and materials and all their overhead costs and all of
Mhm.
their just to get one job, it is astronomical. um, but that's where smaller guys have an advantage.
Right.
They've got a big cruise ship that has everything on it,
Yeah.
and we've got a smaller, maneuverable boat,
Right.
and we can kind of move in, move out, grab this.
Hmm.
So, if you're looking at getting into it, you can go either direction and have success. You know, it's just where does it fall in line with your beliefs and
Hmm.
what you define as success. And so
And,
with
and
that,
I was just
you
saying, and I'm going to add one more thing on that piece. If you're thinking about getting into the industry and you're making that decision on who you want to go work for on that end, what I will say is typically with the smaller companies, you'll get a more rounded education in everything in that trade. So
yeah,
meaning like, and we'll use the plumber as an example because we were talking about plumbers before. So if you come in and do plumbing, I used to work for production builders and custom builders, and a lot of the large plumbing companies, you've got a crew for a plumber that does the underground work, which means that's the only thing to do. They just go out and dig ditches all day long and drop pipes in the ground. So for new construction.
that's
Then
it.
you've got a group that does what we call rough two. So is what we call it, which is where we go in and they put all the pipes in the walls that you're never going to see again, or hope to never see again, put it that way. But they're going to go ahead and put all those pipes in the wall. So get everything ready before insulation and drywall come in the house. And then you've got another crew that comes out and does the trim work, which is putting all the pretty stuff on that you touch every day. All right. So those are the three different things. Well, most of the time with those big companies, they learn one of those three. It's
Yeah,
you're an underground crew, you're a roughing crew, you're a trim crew. So is what you are, which means that they're specialized, which is good, and it's one of the reasons why that they can be effective doing that. If you want to learn all of it, you go to a smaller company because like the plumbers that I use, they do all
yeah,
of that.
yeah.
So
They
which means
have
they
to.
actually have true industry knowledge because they've had to do all the different phases.
Yeah, they have to.
Hmm.
So, it comes down to, what do you want to define as your success path? And
Hmm.
so with that, I'm going to ask you, what
Mhm.
do you personally define, or how do you personally define success?
It's funny because this changes over time.
Yeah.
Whenever I first got into this, oh, and I know a lot of people define success this way whenever they're first getting involved, is the amount of money that you're making. Oh, is that's what you go ahead and that's your, that's your benchmark. That's what you're shooting for. Oh,
Yeah.
that's what you check that off and you have the big parties or celebrate whenever you hit certain numbers and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm in business to earn money. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So
Sure.
I'd make no bones about it. If a homeowner asks me about my percentage, I'm like, you're okay with me earning money, right? So because
Yeah.
I'm assuming you do the same thing for either the business you own or the place you work for. So you're okay with that money. But that's how it was judged in the beginning. And one of the reasons why I think Nate and I are together now is because it's evolved past that point. It's about how can we make an impact in the industry. So, and there's multiple different pieces of that right now. I mean, the first part about that had already rolled in for my homeowners. How can I go ahead and make the industry different so that they experience something better? Because that was that you never hear about the good stuff. You always hear about all the challenges that happen in the industry and how so and so did a poor job. So, and I would never use them again. And and they held us all the horror things that you've heard about. I didn't. I wanted to be a contractor who that was never said about me. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. That was the goal. And then it's all right. How can I change the industry to go ahead and get more people to be that same way? Because then that rehabilitates the image of the industry. So it brings up because the majority of the people in this industry want to do the great job. They expect to do that. That's how they operate. And it's unfortunately the bad apples are the ones that go ahead and taint the industry, taint the image, just like so many other things in life. And now it's actually come down to on top of those pieces. So one of the things that drew Nate and I together is going ahead and we saw the deficit with the trades and the skill people and the knowledge of being able to go ahead and do it effectively and going ahead and teaching people how to go ahead and do that. So get that baseline there of this is the minimum that you've got to learn and these are the things you've got to do for for the next 10,000 hours to get good at them.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you're able to really step up. And now it's even evolved to another level because the other piece that I'm going ahead and creating right now. So is going to be something that one of the things I look at in the industry for the tradespeople. So is most of them don't have any kind of retirement plan at all. And part of what I'm creating is actually going to tie everything together where it's going to be better for the homeowners because they're going to be able to take care of their homes or have someone take care of their homes for them. Because most people, they don't want to do that. So secondly, it's going to go ahead and create opportunity for all of my tradespeople. So where they go ahead and with referrals that they go ahead and do, it literally builds a book of business, almost like an insurance agent goes ahead and gets. So as long as homeowners are involved in the program, the contractor's going ahead and getting a referral fee is what it comes down to. So they can literally build themselves a passive income, a truly passive income on their end, that they can go ahead and retire with and know that there's money coming in the bank every month. So as long as it's taken care of, there's a third part of that for certain contractors who actually want to be the service providers in the area for that piece. So it's another piece that gets added onto your business, which is a really good thing then, because then businesses like Nate and I's, where we do a lot of remodeling jobs and a lot of new construction projects, when the economy dips a little bit and that dips a little, so we've got something else that's the consistent income coming in, which means that we know, hey, if we've got this number of maintenance contracts that we take care of, that means I can have this big of a staff and they're going to be employed no matter what. So we have a certain amount of money coming into our business no matter what, which is a positive thing for us too. So, and then obviously the last piece of that is that when this all comes through, the way it's being planned out right now, so it goes ahead and creates something entirely different for my family that they've never ever imagined, and I'm able to create literally generational wealth. So for them.
Yeah, that's good. So, what are the daily habits and routines that keep you productive and motivated?
It's one of the funny things, and I hear motivation, and it's funny because the area that one of the things I used to do is we used to work with entrepreneurs and business owners, and
Uh,
a lot of people classify that because a lot of it deals with mindset.
yeah.
Oh, and people always talk about that as the woo-woo stuff. It's the motivation stuff. Motivation is literally you get pumped up today and tomorrow it's gone. So it's
Yeah.
one of those things where motivation is not something that sticks around typically for most people. Well, I've actually gone now to it's a discipline piece is what it comes down to. What am I disciplined to do in my life? And the discipline things are the things you do without thinking about it. So there's not a negotiation. I work out every morning. And whenever I get up in the morning, so more mornings than not, I look at myself and I'm like, do I really want to do this today? And it's
Yeah.
that you're disciplined. This is how you start your day. This is what you do. So this is who you are. And I think that's the biggest piece is the changing of this is who I am. So now this is my identity. I get up and I work out every morning. And whenever you go ahead and do like those types of things, so I get up and I work out. So I've just started the grounding piece, if anybody knows anything about that. So it's basically you're outside in nature. So with
Yeah.
your shoes off,
Yeah.
actually touching the ground. Those
Those in the
types of things
sand.
I go ahead and I go ahead and do. And yeah, and people look at that and they're like, that's woo woo. Yeah, it may be woo woo, but you know what? If it works for me and I'm happy with it,
Yeah.
even, and this is one of the funny things, because there's the whole placebo effect thing
Yeah.
that people hear about. And if you don't know what the placebo effect is, it's like they would give people two different pills. One would literally be a sugar pill, and the other one's whatever medication they were testing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, the people who got the sugar pill had the same results, meaning that the conditions got better because they thought the conditions got better.
Hmm.
So it's the same piece of whenever I go out on the ground, some people are like, that's just crazy that actually does, that you think that does anything. That's fine. You can think what you want to think. I'll think what I
Yeah.
want to think. If it works for me, then I'm happy it worked for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it. It's a great space to be in where someone else's opinion matters this much. So, um, so
It's
you go
great
ahead
when
and
you
do
get
what,
there.
yep. So you go ahead and do what works for you. So, but that grounding piece, I do macros, which means for me, the macro that I pay attention to in my diet, that's a dietary term, so is the protein. So is what I go ahead and pay a lot of attention to make sure that I get enough grams of protein in there. And that really helps, especially with me working out every day. So is going ahead and actually building that muscle. And I always take in something good every day, some kind of learning every day, whether that's reading, whether for a lot of times for me, it's actually driving. So it's listening to podcasts or listening to
Hmm.
trainings and things like that, because I get a lot more time in the vehicle at this point. And gives me the opportunity to do that on the weekends. Actually get the chance to read a little bit more. So, but during the week, I'm usually go, go, go. That's my time in the morning is to go ahead and listen to those things. And I'm a Roman Catholic, which means obviously I believe in God. And for me, going ahead and having prayer time, so it's something that's important. It's not something that I do, for hours at a time. It's literally minutes a day. So is
Yeah.
what it is. And for me, that's a centering piece. So it helps me feel just like the grounding stuff that I do. So it helps me feel more balanced overall. And literally the working out thing is the same way. So because when you look at personality types, so I'd get into that's a whole nother conversation. So, but my personality type, if I don't go ahead and do something like workout and let out the energy that's inside of me, unfortunately, I let it out in ways that are less constructive. So, which usually means I'm yelling and screaming at people, and or me getting so frustrated that I'm ready to throw things. None of that works in my business.
Yeah.
So for me to work out, that goes ahead and lets a lot of that energy out.
It sounds like you got a good routine going. Uh, Obviously, it's
And that's what it
contributed to
is
your
the
success.
routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is the best a business decision you've ever made?
Well, if you're gonna ask best decision, that's Alice. There's no question.
Yeah.
That's my wife.
Well,
Um, Best business decision I ever made. That's a good one. I do think it kind of goes back to what we already talked about because there's been some times in the business where the income dips. And like you're talking about, whenever it comes to training and things like that, you start looking at expenses and things, and it's like, do you go ahead and do this or not? Did it get you the return that you're looking for whenever you start looking at things? And, I've had those decisions where, one of the programs that we're in is a relatively investable, high investment program. So, is what it comes down to. And when you look at it, a lot of times you're like, I don't know whether I can directly measure the ROI coming out of that piece. Yet at the same time, whenever I look at it, one of the things that always goes through my head, so this is something that you always want to focus on whenever you're around, especially if you're in construction, because this can really, you'll understand in a second once I get done with this. So, is that the average person? So, if they're around someone who is an A player, more successful, so is driven, so wants to go ahead and has goals and wants to go ahead and create things, when you're around those types of people, so your level will raise 15%. This is a study
mhm.
that's been done. So, your level raises that 15% whenever you're around those people. The converse side of that, so, is if you're around people who are always negative, who are always down, who are always, woe is me and those kinds of things, so who are not top performers in whatever they do, and you're around those people more often, you're, instead of dropping 15% like you would think, it actually drops 30% is what it is. So it actually drags you down faster than what you can raise yourself up. And by staying in some of those groups that I've stayed in, so you stay around that because of the people in it. Because the
Yeah.
people in there typically have the same kind of mindset that you have, so that whenever you're going ahead and getting beat up, they're there to support you. They're there to give you guidance. So they're there to,
Mhm.
tell you the story of, hey, I've been in the same spot you're in right now. So these
Yeah.
are the things that I did to go ahead and work my way out of that. So, and you have people that will actually show you a pathway to get exactly what you want. And those connections that you make out of that, it's not just connections on the business side, it's actually people who become your friends. So, and there's multiple people from the group that I've become great friends with. So, and it's, for me, it's funny because you look at it now and it's Alice always gives me a hard time around here. There's less than a handful of people I hang out with locally. And it's because part of that belief that I've got there. It's like I can go ahead and work, hang out with some of them sometimes, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Like she's going out with a couple tonight, and she's like, "Do you want to go out with them?" I'm like, "Nope." She's like, "Why not? It's just an evening." She's like, "You don't want to spend time with me." I'm like, "It's got nothing to do with you, baby."
Yeah.
So I love you to
Yeah.
death, and you know that. So like this is for me this is usually we have a date night every week, and this was going to be our date night.
Yeah.
And she said that, and she's like, "All right, I get it." She's like, "I like to go out and have fun," and I'm like, "I do," and I said, "No, I don't. I want to hold you back from any of that. So go ahead and do that, but I will not go ahead and put myself in those situations." And that ability to say no to opportunities like that do not serve you, and you've got to
Yeah.
recognize the ones that do and
Yeah.
the ones that don't. That's one of the biggest pieces that ends up happening, and that's one of the things that so many people will go ahead and do something because they feel they have to. I've gotten past that point. I've made that choice in my life, and part of that comes with age and wisdom. So for what works with you and what doesn't, and I look at it now, and it's like I'm not using my time that way. I've got such limited amount of time left on this world. So although I still say
Yeah.
it's 50 years at least, but it's still a limited amount of time. I got a lot of things to do, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to spend it with people who I'm going to literally be sitting there in my head thinking everything else I can be doing at that time. Because if that's the case, I might as well be doing those things.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's like there's people that bring you up and people that take you down, and why spend time with people to take you down? You
No
know?
question about it. It's
I,
like
I
most of my friends now, like I was saying, are they're instead of being locally or throughout the nation. So and
yeah.
some international as far as that part goes. And that's just, whenever we go and do things, we go and do things. So, we're all
And I
good.
think that's a good distinction because as you grow as a leader and as a business owner and just in life in general, um, you've got to shed some of those things to get to where you're at. And, part of that is the ungrateful friends that you had or the bad influences. Even if you're great friends in high school, they're not going to serve you when you're in your 40s and 50s, right? Because you're just on different life paths. So,
And it's the biggest piece to look at, and it can be one of the hardest things to go through is
yeah,
whenever you see that changing because there's a time in your life where you know that that's what you're looking for or that's where you're going.
yeah,
And those people don't think that it's anything different. They think everything should stay the same because they're essentially staying relatively the same
yeah,
whenever they're looking at things. And whenever you want to grow, it's also one of the reasons why you get out of your local area. Because unfortunately, as you start stepping up different levels, there's fewer people in your local area who you can reach out to who understand what you're talking about. And you've
exactly.
got to go ahead and step out into larger pools. So and become that person. It gets scary in the larger pool at times. So there's been times where I
Yeah.
walked into those rooms and it's like, what in the hell am I doing in here? Because I feel unworthy. So walking into those rooms. And whenever that happens, now I learn to embrace that piece. It's the piece of great, this is the place I'm supposed to be in, which means that I'm gonna go ahead and learn a bunch. So being in here, so and I know I can serve them too with the knowledge that I've got at the same time. So that's the fun and exciting part. So that all goes hand in hand, even with the nervousness that can come with it at times. But yeah, it's that piece. So I think is huge. So whenever you do
Yeah.
it, it's getting around the right people. So that'll help you out so much in so many different ways. And I guess one of the things that encourages me is even some of the younger guys who are coming into the industry or working with some of our trades and things like that. I look at the younger people on their crew, and whenever I'm on site, they like attempt to come over to me to talk to me. And it's like, all right, I know I'm making a difference in their lives, or at least in what they're seeing as possibilities. So
Yeah.
because they're stepping aside, they're taking that extra time to go ahead and talk with me. And I then in conversely in that I take the extra time to talk to them whenever I see that happening because I know that they're looking for that guidance and that next person and someone to help them. Oh, and I take that same time to be able to do that.
So my last question then, if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them? You know, how would that
I
conversation
think
go?
the biggest one that popped in my head immediately whenever you asked that question, Nate, so is that, and this is one of the things that it took a while for me to get to this point and realize this, is everything in your life happens to you for a reason and it serves you. And there's so many times you don't know why it's happening, and you think as it's going on, it's the worst thing that could happen. I got
Yeah.
laid off from my job in 2009, there were no construction jobs. So I had no income coming in. And I'm like, and what in the hell am I going to go ahead and do to support myself? I didn't have a family at that point. But go ahead and take care of all of my, I had a house, I had vehicles, you have all the expenses you normally have. And all, I mean, what am I going to do? I mean, where do I go from here? Same thing when I went through my divorce. So it's like the worst thing. Well, I figured I was going to be with that woman forever. So whenever I got married with the intention it was going to be forever. And there's so many times when those pieces happen to you. So and as long as you embrace them, lean into it and learn from it, so they actually make you the person and create the skills that I was since I believe in God, I look at it as God knows you have skills that you need to learn to go ahead and go to the next step. And he has to teach you those skills. So is what it comes down to. And those lessons come in many different forms. So, and majority of the lessons, like Nate and I were talking about before, are not you don't learn lessons typically when they're the good lesson. You learn them because they're painful, and I'm never going to repeat this lesson again. That is what it comes down to. And sometimes you don't learn that lesson, and you do get to repeat it over and over and over again until you actually go, ah, I get it. This is what I'm supposed to learn out of this. Knowing that that's the case, so knowing that no matter what happens, it's temporary. So you're always going to get through it, and to look for the opportunity in each of those challenges that pops up in your life, because there is always an opportunity. So it just depends on how you frame it and what you look for in it. And I think that's where so many people get caught. So I've seen it, and there's adults older than me who get caught in those kinds of things, and they get caught in those cycles. And unfortunately for them, the cycles can last years. So where they're just spinning with whatever challenge popped up in their life. We're humans. There's going to be challenges every day that pop up in our lives. So it's how you handle the challenge and what you take out of it. And I always look for the repetition in it, like I said, because if I'm seeing something over and over again, I'm supposed to learn a lesson that I haven't learned yet. And those are the ones that I really pay attention to. So God's only going to do what he needs to do or she needs to do, depending on what you believe, as far as God goes. But God's only going to do what you need to learn to be able to get to the potential that you've got. So which means I'm going to learn a lot of hard lessons. So, and that's just part of the process to get me where I want to go. Because for the vision unfortunately, I've got a whole ton of hard lessons coming up to be able to become the person who can go ahead and handle what I want to go ahead and create. There's no question about it.
Okay, thank you very much for
Yep.
being so open and honest and giving us your insights. I just enjoy talking with you. So
Yeah,
and
I always love that, like this type of thing, and when you get to know people on a different level, so it really opens things up. So I think it's
yeah,
one of the keys, and it's one of those pieces that you just most people don't get the chance to do that. You don't take the time to do that. Actually, I
yeah,
highly encourage. One of the things that's come more to light to me, especially with people who are the older people in your lives, your older relatives and things like that. So get a chance to talk to them. So take that. A, they're gonna love it just because I mean
yeah,
they're so used to everybody being so busy and never taking that time. Take that time. They'll love every minute of it. And you're gonna gain some things that you might have never thought. And from some of the strangest places that you would, it's like I would have never expected that to come out of their mouth with that kind of wisdom, just because you don't know their history. You don't know what they've been through.
yeah,
And just to have those conversations can be the most interesting thing. It's like doing this type of thing where, we're doing this and then we'll do one where I go ahead and put Nate on the hot seat so and grill his butt. But we're doing those kinds of things and and having fun with it, and it's the great way, especially you get into so many people are concerned or afraid of networking whenever they get dropped in rooms. And first person to admit, I'm not someone who likes doing that. I'm not the outgoing person right off the bat. So it isn't typically who I am. And yet this type of thing, when you get that, just start asking questions, be inquisitive. So for me, it's how can I help you out? And that's one of the questions that comes up at some point. So as we're going through things, but I mean, I always ask about lessons that they've learned. I've always asked about life experiences and things like that. I mean, it's just such an interesting thing. And started to gather so many different things. And for your family, you gather so many stories that you never heard of before, because you
yeah,
typically have the same 8 to 10 stories that pop up at any family gathering. Whenever you start to ask these questions, that just jogs memories that people have forgotten about and haven't thought about. And, so many things about, you find out about relatives that you didn't know or know at all. So who used
yeah,
to do the same types of things that you do, or may have been involved even in a business that you're in now, so that you never knew about. It's the fun part. Be inquisitive in life, so you'll get a lot further, no question about it.
absolutely.
All right, awesome. So for anyone who's listening to this, so make sure to share this. So it's one of the biggest ways you can help us out. is to go ahead and share this out to all your friends, your contacts. Go ahead and post it on social media. So leave us a comment if you've got a question and you want to know more, especially like you hear these types of things with Nate and I going ahead and having a conversation like this. And you're like, I want to dive deeper. Nate didn't ask this question. He should have hit this. So ask the question in the comments. So we'll be more than happy to go ahead and answer that for you. So we're here for you, especially for this people in this industry who want to go ahead and grow or possibly get into it if they haven't gotten into the industry yet. We want to see you be successful. You are our future. And that to us is one of the biggest keys. So is your interest, you're stepping forward, you're sharing this. Let's get this message out to as many people as we can because we need a ton of great people stepping into the construction industry to be able to carry this on. So with what's been laid out to us already. So see you next time.